Victor Lewe has taken over my life in more ways than one. At the moment, I've got his 1916 thesis in German, and I believe I know what it's saying. I think I can see the conclusion, and I'm jumping on from the conclusion into quantum and looking at time gradients and the splitting of time gradients, which I believe what you're looking at. But it's worth understanding the story of Lewe to me, perhaps so you'll understand why it's so important to me and I think to us. In 2008, as part of my civil engineering degree, I did my thesis, and my lecturer set it on bending moments in concrete circular tanks. He wanted to know, was there a way of working it out rather than using coefficients? What he said to me. I'd have spent a really happy 2.5 months nearly in the library of the Institute of Civil Engineers, once or twice a week, sitting in there writing my thesis. It was a wonderful environment to be in. Proper old school. And I found that the coefficient tables that my lecturer was referring to had no reference. You couldn't tell how they were calculated. They didn't tell you. And that's really odd, really odd. In engineering, ridiculously wrong. You just can't, because you can't check. You don't know. And the note in the front of the book of where these coefficients come from the Portland Cement Association, says, this theory has stood for half a century. It's good enough for you. That's it. And then the second note says, it's up to the engineer to assess whether the contents are appropriate for his use. Now, you can't have both. So, made me cross. So I went hunting through references. And long story short, I found Dr. Lewe being referenced. And because I found the name of Dr. Lewe, I found a paper in 1915 that he wrote, an article in volume 5 of the Handbook for Eisenbettenbau, the manual for reinforced concrete, that explained what he was trying to do, his ethos, if you like. There was a foreword, and I took some of that information from that foreword and put it into my thesis, and so that's the translation that I have. It's in German, obviously. Now, the ICE can't find that at the moment, that book for me, so I can't check what I'd said. But I don't need to, because I know what I said was right. And what I said was this. Lewe was a scientist and come from a physics mathematics background. Did his doctorate under Alexander Brill, who also a few years earlier had done Max Planck. So he takes, Alexander Brill was a brilliant mathematician, cosmologist, takes the best students. 1906, it's Victor Lewe. Victor Lewe has set off to try to interpret theory into practical use with a pure heart, I believe. He's really trying to do it. And so in 1915, he tells me that this is the best that I can do, but this bit I'm giving you is for den Mathematik des Ganninger, I think. The mathematically less well-trained is what he means. So that means for engineers who don't need to know the physics, you just need to know what lies behind it. And so he gives us that in this Handbook for Eisenbettenbau. By searching and searching and searching and searching and not giving up, because I know that Lewe was important. His name came back to me only 6 months ago when I realized there was a trick that was being played on us in E equals MC squared that looked very much like this coefficient trick that I remembered from my thesis. I dug my thesis out of my loft and I read it and I went, wow, Lewe knows. He knows what I know about quantum. And he knows what's wrong with the foundation of physics. And so I found eventually all this work I've now done on Lewe, I know lots about him. And I found this paper that he wrote in 1916. 1915. It's published, it's actually referenced in his thesis in 1916 as a professor. But the document that I've got is dated 1915. So he publishes it early. It then forms part of his doctorate, and he's given his doctorate in 1916. So that's where we're standing with him. And he presents this information as using his Dr. SC Nat, his Dr. Physics title. So what he's saying here is, this is the information that I was talking about in 1915 in the handbook. This is the information I was talking about. So this is really detailed information about how I've arrived at these loadings for the concrete tanks. And so at the conclusion of this document that I hold, which is the best document that a physicist has ever written in terms of trying to allow someone else to understand what they are saying and to translate it into their own language, that has enabled me to see, well, that's what's wrong with the foundation of physics. Lewe's done it. The coincidence of me knowing this in 2008 and me then linking this information back up again 6 months ago, and then finding this document, and then understanding that I was right, that this is the document that does fix the foundation of physics, is an incredible feeling, and an incredible feeling of frustration that nobody wants to look at it. I can't make anyone see this is important. But it's coming. It's really coming. The icing on the cake is now going to be this 1914 paper by someone called Johannes Stein, which I stumbled across looking at the classmates of Victor Lewe. So other people who did their doctorates under Alexander Brill. First guy I clicked on, Johannes Stein. He's 1914, and his thesis is Matrix Calculus Applied to Relativity. The title of it is called that. And so we got those two papers now. Suddenly, two papers linking matrix calculus directly to relativity, quantum, Einstein. These are before Einstein. These papers are known. This information is known in German science by the smartest people. And they gave us general relativity instead and pushed Einstein to the front, to front what they were doing as a mask for what they were actually doing. So here's a proposal that I put to you that Lewe is saying. Science says you can't quantize gravity. Matrix calculus is quantizing. It's a window. It's a technique of opening a window. But you can put a frame around a point, put a 0-point energy. You can put a frame around it using your coefficient table matrix of your own creation, and that elastic membrane can be stretched and you can observe it. And that's matrix calculus, that's quantizing. That's the world of quantum. It's a stretched world that we've created through this trick of matrix calculus. And so gravity is quantized because it's the only thing that exists that you can measure. You've taken a piece of gravity, which is a time gradient, and it's a piece of time gradient that has no time gradient across it, and it's the energy that creates the bond between the zones of time gradient. When you quantize it, you split it, and you look at the figure 14 from Lewe, the last drawings of his waves. That's what you've seen. You've separated it all out into these spaces, into this pattern. When you turn that pattern over and you see it's a circle and it's waves, and you see spirals, and you see an anti-clockwise spiral turning against a clockwise motion. 137 arc seconds, tick-tock. So gravity has been quantized. It's what you're looking at with all the information that you currently have. It's why it's so wonderful that everyone is right. Even the physicists are right. You just need to switch this perspective and look at it again, and you see that you have the answer. So I want to say thanks, Dr. Lewe, Associate Professor, Dr. Victor Lewe. Thank you for that paper that you gave me, that you in 2023, that you wrote in 1915. For everything else you've done afterwards, that's your conscience, my friend. Yeah. It gets really deep, because when you look at the way that energy expresses itself, you'll see that Lewe is expressing himself through you, through us. That the darkness that we feel, the push towards narcissism, is Dr. Lewe, not you. And if you want to see what happens if you let it go, look at Dr. Victor Lewe the younger, SS Obersturmführer Victor Lewe, who worked in the pathology lab of Buchenwald and Sachsenhausen. And he was the guy who liked to put the tattoos in the jars in his office. Go and look him up. And you don't want that, do you? And I know one thing, I don't. And I don't want it for you. I don't want it for us. I don't want it for this world. I don't want it for this planet. I'm sick of being treated like a child. All this stuff going on and nobody's telling us. Sick of it. Aren't you? Let's go and get the truth. Love rules. Do the work. Cheers.